Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Éire's Epics in History. I'm your host, John Fisher. Hope you've all had a good day. I just got back from such a great experience. I sat at my first Seder dinner for the first time, and it was amazing. The food was amazing. The people were amazing. Just the whole experience. It was kind of like a game. That's how they treated it. It was just such a fun celebration. Seriously, if you have not been to one, I highly recommend it. And I tell you more about it, but we got to get right into it. So, we left off yesterday with the end of the War of Independence. You now have Northern Ireland with 6 counties and Southern Ireland with 26. Now, around 1920, in March of 1920, the British deploy a new police force in Ireland. And this police force is made up of men who previously served in the war against Germany and couldn't find work when they came back. And they become known as the Blacks and Tans because the uniforms they wore were actually a cross between the traditional dark black clothing you see on police officers and khaki clothing items because there weren't enough dark black uniforms to go around. And many of these men have been just made violent by their experiences in the war. They're very brutal. And they use these experiences to motivate their actions when dealing with the Irish. So, as you can imagine, they were pretty tough on the Irish. And then you have the auxiliaries, another form of police officers who were older ex-police officers. They'd served in Britain as police officers, and they were older. They had a bit more freedom than the Blacks and Tans in terms of the actions they could take. They were more experienced, and they were also they were tougher but more responsible in their actions. And in the second half of 1920, you have 30,000 British soldiers in Ireland, and you have 11,000 police officers, which includes the Blacks and Tans and auxiliaries. Now, the IRA is hesitant to go up against the soldiers because of their professional experience. And the Lloyd George also doesn't want the soldiers playing the role of peace maintainer. So a lot of the burden of maintaining peace is put on the Blacks and Tans and the auxiliaries. Now, for the Blacks and Tans, this is very difficult due to the guerrilla attacks launched by the IRA. And because the IRA is so different from the Germans when they were fighting the Germans in World War I. The Germans you could identify because of their uniform. They were in one trench and the Allies were in another trench. So you could see the enemy across the field. But the IRA, they don't have uniforms. They could be everywhere and invisible at the same time. They can launch an attack and then run into the crowd and blend in. And this, for the Blacks and Tans, was very difficult. And there really were no rules like there were during the war. There were rules of warfare that both sides abided by. Whereas with the IRA, there are no rules. And this builds up tension in the Blacks and Tans to the point where when they had their meltdowns or breaking points, they would actually react in inhuman and savage ways that terrorized the Irish. And so when the IRA was still the Irish Volunteers in 1917 and 1918, it was looked at as a nuisance by the Irish. Now, in 1920, it's seen as the only line of defense that the Irish have against the Blacks and Tans. And one significant example of this tension between the IRA and the Blacks and Tans was the original Bloody Sunday, which occurred on November 21st in 1920. Michael Collins ordered the execution of 11 men that he believed to be spies, and the IRA followed through with it. In addition to killing those 11 men, they end up killing 3 British soldiers. So, I think it was 3 British soldiers. It may have been actually, no, it was 3 British soldiers, not 3 British police officers. But yes, they end up killing 3 British soldiers, which brings the total number of deaths to 14. That same afternoon, the Blacks and Tans drive armored vehicles into Dublin Stadium, where a Gaelic football match is going on. They interrupt the match, and they get out of their cars, and they take out guns and start shooting at the crowd around the football match. And they kill 13 people, wound several others. And then that night, two suspected members of the IRA who were captured are killed in Dublin Castle. So basically, this event causes, because of the deaths of these 11 men by the IRA, plus the 3 British soldiers, this causes a so-called policy of reprisals that initially was just condoned, but now it's been authorized in 1920. And this leads to more violence against the Irish. For instance, a man by the name of Thomas McCurtain, who was the Lord Mayor of Cork City, he is shot dead in his own home by members of the Royal Irish Constabulary, who had disguised themselves as civilians. And his successor, a man by the name of Terence McSweeney, he ends up, sorry, I'm a little tired here, but he ends up being arrested, and because he was found to possess documents that were likely to cause disaffection to the king. And so he's arrested, and after 74 days of a hunger strike, he dies in Brixton Prison. And another man by the name of Thomas Ashe also dies while on hunger strike in prison. He was arrested in 1917, and he dies because the prison warden tries to force feed him, and he unfortunately ends up losing his life as a result. Now, so these are just a few examples of the tension between the Blacks and Tans and the IRA, but Cork especially was hit hard, was affected by this tension. And what ends up happening is that in December of 1920, the Blacks and Tans set fire to the center of Cork City, and it was considered a reprisal for several IRA attacks in County Cork. And they end up trying to hinder the fire brigade trying to put out the fire, and the fire just destroys all of Patrick Street, Dublin city centre, shops and businesses, the library, other public institutions, and so basically this was their way of saying to the IRA, we're not backing down. The more you attack us, the more we're going to attack back. But the destruction of Cork City really hits the Irish hard, and it makes them just more determined to become independent from Great Britain. And we're going to go over this desire for independence and how they eventually succeed in tomorrow's video. But that's it for tonight's video. So I hope you all enjoy it. Thank you so much for listening, and please comment below the video. Let me know if there's anything you'd like me to say more about. Let me know if I missed anything. Anyway, I'm so out of it, and I'm still kind of in kind of in a food coma from the Seder dinner. But until next time, here's John Fisher signing off.